Howdy folks, and welcome to War Thunder with the mighty Jingles. Today I'm going to be looking at the various different ammunition choices available in War Thunder Ground Forces and explaining why it is not always a good idea to simply pick the ammunition that has the highest penetration, because unlike World of Tanks, for example, in World of Tanks you just pick whatever has the best penetration. Once you've penetrated the enemy armour, you're going to do whatever the damage value listed for your gun is. This does not happen in War Thunder. In War Thunder, it gets a lot more complicated once you've penetrated the armour of the tank. And that's because the actual effects of the various different ammunition are modelled quite realistically in War Thunder. And a lot of the time, people are just picking whichever ammunition has the highest penetration. And that usually means APCR, armour-piercing composite rigid ammunition, as soon as it's unlocked, because that has the best penetration performance, mostly across the board, of all the different ammunition types, whether you're driving German tanks or Soviet tanks, doesn't matter. APCR ammunition, if it's available for your tank, generally has the highest penetration. But it's not as simple as that. The default ammunition choice that you have unlocked immediately as soon as you get a new tank is generally some kind of armour piercing. In the case of the Germans here, it's Apc Bc, or armour piercing capped or composite ballistic capped ammunition. The reason this ammunition was introduced was because as muzzle velocities of the shells increased, in particular here 75mm German anti-tank gun, it was noted that steel armour-piercing ammunition tended to shatter on impact rather than penetrate once it was fired above a certain muzzle velocity. In order to get around this, Apc Bc ammunition was developed. Apc Bc ammunition was a development of an earlier type of improvement to armour-piercing ammunition known as APC, or just armour-piercing capped. What they would do was they would put a cap of softer metal around the tip of the armour-piercing round. This cap, and I'm reading directly from Wikipedia here, this cap transferred energy from the tip of the shell to the sides of the projectile, helping to reduce the shattering. It also appeared to improve the penetration of sloped armour by deforming, spreading and sticking to the armour on impact, reducing the tendency of the shell to deflect at an angle. However, the cap structure of the armour-piercing capped shell reduced the aerodynamic efficiency of the round, which led to a reduction in accuracy and range. To address the reduction in accuracy, a second cap or cover was introduced. This became known as the Apc Bc ammunition. This involved fitting a streamlined ballistic cap over the armour-piercing cap, which increased accuracy, reduced the in-flight loss of velocity, and increased the penetration. So this is your basic default ammunition type available for most armoured vehicles in War Thunder Ground Forces. And you can see that the penetration values indicated at 500 metres are 98mm, and at 1000 metres, 82mm. The next ammunition type that most people unlock in War Thunder is high explosive anti-tank or heat ammo. This is a type of hollow charge warhead, and how heat ammo works is very, very complicated. As far as you need to know, the main characteristic of high explosive anti-tank hollow charge ammunition in War Thunder is that it has exactly the same penetration value at all ranges. It does not lose penetration with range in the same way that armour-piercing ammunition does. All of the magic with high explosive anti-tank hollow charge ammunition happens at the point of impact on the target. It does not matter how fast the shell is leaving the barrel of the gun. So muzzle velocity is not an important factor for heat ammunition as far as armour penetration is concerned. Then of course we come to everybody's favourite ammunition type, APCR, armour-piercing composite rigid, and this tends to be the kind of ammunition type that everybody rushes to unlock and then exclusively uses nothing but APCR ammunition on their tanks from that point on. And why not? It's got the best penetration. Penetration is not everything. In fact, sometimes having too much penetration can be the reason why you are not killing tanks when you're shooting at them. First, however, we're going to look at how APCR actually works. The way APCR ammunition works, if you have a look at the picture here, you can see various different calibers of APCR ammunition. These are all British. The one thing that they have in common is that the penetrator core of all of these different shell types is made of a very dense submunition, typically tungsten carbide, and it's surrounded by a much lighter material like an aluminium alloy. What this means is it has a much lighter weight shell, while being exactly the same muzzle diameter, if you like, of a non-APCR round. So it leaves the barrel with exactly the same amount of force as a regular armor-piercing shell, but it weighs a lot less, anything up to half the weight of a regular armor-piercing round. So the muzzle velocity is much higher. What happens when APCR actually strikes the target is that the jacket of lightweight alloy just fragments and doesn't penetrate. All of the penetrating power, all of that kinetic energy is concentrated in the penetrator core, usually made out of tungsten carbide, but it's a very narrow submunition, so all of that energy is concentrated into a very small point of impact. And that is what makes APCR so good at punching through armor. And then of course you've got your other default ammunition choice, high explosive. You'll notice that high explosive ammunition does not have an armor penetration value listed, and that's because it was not supposed to be fired at armored vehicles. High explosive ammunition is there for taking out anti-aircraft guns, anti-tank guns, things like that. It does have its place in War Thunder, but that place is almost never firing at tanks. The Soviets also get a Shrapnel Charge, but again, this is a lot like high explosive. Shrapnel charges were designed for taking out massed infantry caught in the open. You can have some success using them against lightly armoured vehicles in the same way that you would use high explosive, but again, this is not an ammunition type that's designed to be fired at tanks. The Parola Tank Museum in Finland has got a practical demonstration here of what these various different munition types did to the turret of a T-54. Everything marked with a 1 as a result of hits from 100mm Apc Bc. The shot that you can see there marked with the number 2 was another 100mm Apc Bc which hit but didn't penetrate due to the angle. The two tiny holes above each other are 55mm Finnish APCR penetration holes, and that big old hole marked with the number 9 is 100mm high explosive anti-tank that went in through a hole that had already been penetrated by 100mm Apc Bc. So, we've covered the theory, and now we understand how all the various different ammunition types actually work, and it's important that we understand how they work, because how they work is actually modelled in War Thunder. What happens after your shot has penetrated the armour is as important as figuring out whether or not your shot is going to penetrate the armour in the first place. And this is why simply loading APCR ammunition, even though it easily has the best penetration, is not always a good idea in War Thunder. This is why people are complaining so much about broken game mechanics when they're penetrating a tank over and over with APCR ammunition, but they're not killing it. And so to illustrate exactly why this is the case, let's have a look at some practical examples from within the game. First, high explosive. That is just a Panzer IIc. High explosive ammunition does nothing to him, even fired into his weak side armour. It just isn't penetrating. It doesn't matter where I choose to shoot at this guy with high explosive ammunition, it is not going to penetrate his tank. Do not waste your time with high explosive. Next up, notice how the shell drop indicator changes when I load high explosive anti-tank. Now, high explosive anti-tank penetrated, but it has much lower muzzle velocity. So the fact that high explosive anti-tank ammo has exactly the same penetration value at all ranges does not necessarily mean that it's a great choice to use at long range where it has the highest penetration, even beating APCR. And we're going to look at that in greater detail in the next clip, but for the moment we're switching to Apc Bc, and we're going to take a shot. There you go, a Panzer IV, one-shotted with Apc Bc. Now that's important. I did not need to use APCR at that guy. That shot penetrated, ricocheted around inside the tank and wrecked the interior. look at the damage that the next APC Bc did to the Panther fired from the side. Now I'm going to switch to APCR. The reason that Apc Bc is a much better choice of ammunition to be using if it will penetrate is because it does not over penetrate. Watch this shot. There. APCR penetrated the Panther from the side and did very little damage. That's because the APCR has too much penetration. Fired at the side of a Panther. It's going through the armour that I'm facing. It's damaging whatever it meets on the way, and then is going clean out the other side. It has too much penetration. It's not ricocheting around the inside of the tank and killing everything. If I switch back to Apc Bc, or just normal armour-piercing ammo, bang. I've wrecked the Panther. The shot penetrated and didn't escape through the other side of the tank. It did maximum damage to the inside. That's why using APCR at targets that you can penetrate with AP is a bad idea. This is why it's important in War Thunder that you keep a mix of ammunition and you don't just exclusively go into battle with nothing but APCR ammo. When you're firing at all of those tiny little tier 1 AI tanks with APCR, it isn't killing them because the shot is going straight into one end and straight out the other without doing any damage to the interior other than the unlucky gunner that it hits on the way. If you can penetrate a tank with armour-piercing ammo, you should always fire armour-piercing because it is going to do maximum damage to the internal components of the tank when it hits without over-penetrating and going out the other side. You should only be using APCR ammunition at targets that you cannot penetrate with normal armour-piercing. Now you may be sitting there thinking to yourself, oh, Jingles, this is all far too complicated. I'm never going to remember all of this. You know what? I'm just going to take high explosive anti-tank ammunition. 87mm of penetration with the 75mm high explosive anti-tank shell on the Stug 3A, for example, is fine. You know, that'll penetrate everything that a tier 1 tank destroyer is going to go up against, and that's certainly true. And it's also true that high explosive anti-tank ammunition is still the best choice as far as pure penetration is concerned at extreme ranges. When you're shooting at targets in excess of 1 kilometre up to 2 kilometres away, generally speaking, high explosive anti-tank ammo has the most consistent penetration values. But it also has the lowest muzzle velocity, and that's a very important factor. Look at how high I have to elevate my gun barrel in order to get anywhere near the target that I'm shooting at in the Stug 3A here, firing heat ammo in this simulator battle on Kursk. And this is because simple penetration values of the ammunition that you're firing is not the only factor that you have to take into account. The muzzle velocity is also very important. Much more so in realistic and simulator battles where you don't get any kind of aiming assistance and you have to calculate the amount of shell drop for range yourself. And that makes it very difficult to hit the targets with high explosive anti-tank ammo at the kind of ranges where high explosive anti-tank ammo is the best kind of ammo to use. So there you have it, ammunition in War Thunder explained. Now hopefully you understand why when you're firing 75mm APCR at the side of tier 1 AI tanks, you're not killing them. Now hopefully you understand that it is always a better choice if your regular armour-piercing ammunition can penetrate the tank that you're shooting at. Fire regular armour-piercing ammunition. It's not going to over-penetrate, it's not going to fly straight out the other side of the tank, doing minimal damage to whatever it encounters on the way. It's going to punch through the armour that it strikes, it's going to damage whatever it hits on the way to the other side of the tank, and then it's going to stop when it hits the armour on the opposite side of the tank, and it's going to ricochet around the inside, and it's going to do a lot of damage. It's going to kill the tank. APCR is just going to go straight out the other side. APCR definitely has its place in War Thunder, but that place is shooting at targets that cannot be penetrated by regular armour-piercing ammo. Fired at targets like that, it's going to have the same effect as regular armour-piercing, but stop wasting your APCR ammunition on targets that do not require APCR to be fired at it. Take a mix of ammunition types into the games that you play, use the appropriate ammunition on the appropriate target. You'll do a lot more damage, you'll get a better score, you'll have a lot more fun. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it's going to go some way towards making your War Thunder experience a lot more enjoyable now that you understand how the various different ammunition types work. As always, folks, take care on that battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.